Welcome back to the second half of Advice Tech Live. We've talked a lot about using technology to help financial advice businesses deliver better customer propositions. And we're now going to spend the next 15 minutes focused squarely on the customer. We conducted a consumer focus group to help shape this session, and I'll be sharing clips from that session today. We have more clips available from the session, which we'll make available on our website, taking Kate's tips. And so if you want to see more from that focus group, we'll be releasing that over the next couple of weeks. So if you put up the first slide, it's just a profile of the people that were in the group. So we had 6 people in our virtual focus group, and the requirement, the sort of criteria to be included was they had to have £250,000 of investable assets outside of property. They have to pay for financial advice on an ongoing basis and to have received financial advice within the past year. And as you can see from the slide, they represent a broad mix. One of the guys was on the Transact platform and talks to his advisor for 30 minutes every month. Another one was on Hargreaves Lansdown, but gets face-to-face advice, typically in her home, from her financial planner who's employed by Hargreaves Lansdown, but of course is beginning that virtually, but from a real mix of different perspectives and different age groups. So what we found in the focus group, we started by asking about how they've been working with their advisor in the past, how they've been working with them throughout the coronavirus pandemic, and how they'd like to work with their advisor moving forward. And it's of course hypothetical, so it's hard to say, but people did have some indication of what's worked and what they'd like to keep, but what they'd also like to bring back from pre-COVID time. And what we heard about video meetings is they're better, not just faster. So there was a lot of talk about convenience. I don't have to travel. I don't have to go across London. It takes me an hour to get everywhere. Somebody else saying don't have to get into the car. Don't have to, have the person to my house. I can just do it when I need them. Easier to get a time scheduled. So there's lots of talk about convenience, but there was also some talk about it being better. The screen sharing element was better. It was a really focused conversation. One of the attendees said that she really liked getting an agenda ahead of time, some prep and reading. She felt more prepared for the meetings and felt that made them work better. I want to share a couple of clips now about how the consumers want to work moving forward with their advisor. We've put a poll in the chat. So the polls sit within the event tab within the chat. There's a chat and poll. So in the poll, if you could just tell us how you plan to work with customers coming out of COVID, and we'll see what the customers had to say about this in this video.
Definitely think meeting online, whether, like I said, on Teams or whether it be Zoom, is the way forward now for me. There is no need to go back to the way that we, like the emails, because it's like the email, you've got to open it, you've got to read it. It just seems so antiquated now, to be quite honest. And I'm just so used to using this platform now that I just think it's the way forward. And my advisor would also agree, I believe it would agree with me in terms of getting the best from each other at a shorter space of time as well.
So I think the whole Zoom is really good. It's much better for me than a phone call. It's nicer for me to see a face at the end there. And the meetings, I think I would prefer to have them on Zoom. It's just so much more convenient for everybody.
Well, again, because my relationship has over time been predominantly remote, there's not been a significant change. The one thing that we have started to do more, and it's probably to help me understand better, but I appreciate, is the use of more dashboards and graphics, because rather than a dry table or just a lot of writing on an email, seeing something graphically about how things have been spread out, what's red, what's amber, what's green, and how that's moved over time has been very positive, and I'd like to see more of that. And because we're doing more interactive online meetings rather than what we had before, which is a relatively sterile Skype type conversation, it's the sort of thing that you can do to play some what if games. What if you were to do this? What if this exchange rate or this interest rate were to change? And you can see how that that balances out and try and get a better look at managing risk. So I think more of that and the scenario playing in real time would be helpful.
Great.
Well, the one thing that is good to stop with a financial advisor is sending documentation through the post. It's a waste of paper, waste of postage, and it's a headache to sort of file it away. So we stopped that a long time ago, and everything's done electronically. I do, however, like to get an email with perhaps an overview of the agenda of what we're going to discuss, and possibly terms and conditions and a little bit of documentation via email, so I can look at it, ingest it and research it prior to having then a Zoom conversation, because it cuts out a lot of toing and froing on Zoom, saying, well, what does this mean? What does that mean? Because I would have had the chance to study the document. And I know that's using an email and it might be a little bit antiquated, but for me, I like to just have to do my research before we get into a conversation, because it could be an hour's worth of waste of time asking, what does this mean? What does that mean? Whereas if we could cover that before the conversation, we can just get straight to the basics and on with the deal or no deal, as it were.
I think, you know, for me, I think what I would like to continue Zoom for is definitely the preliminary conversations and to understand the product a bit more and what's on offer. However, I personally like meeting, you know, face to face to actually do the transaction and to make sure I completely understand what I signed up for. You know, so for me, that's something that I think is important, and often I find when you meet face to face, you actually pick up, you know, other things that weren't on the agenda, that perhaps, you know, wasn't kind of preset. So for me, that's important, you know, moving forward as well.
You know, sometimes actually I don't want to be over the internet discussing my finances all the time. You know, maybe that's slightly paranoid, but actually I do sometimes just prefer a face-to-face meeting when you're together and talking about it. So I will go back to that. Obviously it won't be, we'll still carry on with the Zooms and all of that. It really depends on exactly what's happening or what's needed at any given moment.
I'd like to do it face to face if it's somebody new. Just the body language, the way they're turned out, even, or their office. Unique first impressions are very important in my book. So yeah, I'd like to meet them face to face.
I would probably have an initial face-to-face meeting, possibly, but you know, again, I've kind of got used to Zoom, but I suppose that first initial meeting, yeah, I kind of would like to meet them and sort of, it sounds a bit hippie-ish, but feel their energy a little bit, you know, sort of actually sense them in the room and kind of see who they are, really. There are certain things you can do through Zoom, but I don't know. It depends. It depends on who the person is and the circumstances more than anything.
So one of my favorite things, there's not many, but one of the things I've really enjoyed about lockdown is the ability to do consumer research and consumer focus groups so much easier on Zoom. And it was a delight to be able to talk to this group of people who are really thoughtful about how they have worked and how they want to work with their financial advisor. And I think that last point that was made by so the gentleman, I won't say his name, he has business interests in Latin America and Europe and works with his financial advisor across his portfolio of his business interests, but also his financial, his wealth in the UK, and recently bought a property. And he's a really sophisticated investor, and he's young and he's tech savvy. And he really wants to get a sense for the person and the human, and it's so important. And there's been a lot of talk about the challenges of building a business through COVID, a financial planning business through COVID, and that inability to meet people face to face, I think, has been a critical part of that. So you know, our view is that face to face will play an important role, but as one of the commentators made in the chat, it really depends on the clients, and financial advisors and people working in those businesses know their customers best, and it will be different for different types of customers. That flexibility is really, really important. I thought those messages about it's better, not just faster, really came through. One of the earlier videos was a gentleman who talked about the scenario analysis, what if situations, to be able to go through some of those scenarios on an online meeting. And he's been meeting with his advisor mostly by phone over the past number of years that he's been working with his advisor, but has been doing it obviously by Zoom. And he said that he found that interaction better than phone and better than face-to-face, partly because of that ability to screen share. We also asked about the use of client portal and whether that would be of interest. We showed some examples of a couple of client portals to get feedback. And if we could roll the video from the feedback on the client portals, please.
I have one where I can see my investments, and there's other things that I can't see. So I think having it all in a one-stop shop, you know, I can see everything there, would be an advantage, and it would be a selling point as well. If my financial advisor says to me, look, I'm going to put everything on here, you can then, you know, look through it at your own time. It would be a selling point for me. So somebody coming along offering me a service or a platform like that with everything there would be a tick for me, definitely.
Yeah, I totally agree with Heather. I mean, I currently use a platform where I can look at my investments, but there's no information on my rental properties and things like that. So to have all my fingers in every pie under one portal would be extremely useful. Yeah, very much so.
I like the idea of you know, being able to have something where you can do a quick sense check and look at something at a flash, and be able to kind of run a bit of analysis. And one thing in particular that is a real I find a real nuisance is when you're sort of trying to track you know, pensions every now and again, and you have different pensions in different places, and to be able to have all that information at a fingertip in one place, especially if you're using different providers for different things, you know, would be really useful. I know from speaking to kind of relatives in the past who have got, you know, various different investments in different places, and you know, it takes them a lot of time to bring all that together, especially if some of these investments, you know, not had any communication or any correspondence with, you know, for several years. So I think, you know, a platform to be able to do that would be really, really useful, and something that's probably missing for me.
Great. So if anyone would like to see more videos from that focus group, we've got a lot more. Some of the other things that we covered, there was a quote of the person who mentioned Heather. That wasn't me. There was another Heather in the focus group with 6 people. What are the chances? But she wasn't agreeing with me. There was real product focus from some of the consumers, and there was one of the people, I think, in one of those clips mentioned it would be seen as a selling point for a product. They kept on coming back to product and seeing that client portal or the scenario analysis, and we talked about that as being part of a product sale rather than a more holistic financial plan. And I think that's a reality of a way a lot of consumers still think about their investments. 3 other things we asked them about: open banking. There was a huge willingness to share data with their trusted financial advisor. All of them said that they would have no issue sharing their transactional level banking data with their financial advisor. When we asked about a new financial planner, there was some hesitance. When we asked if that financial planner or financial advisor was referred by a trusted accountant or lawyer, they were more willing, but there was a sense that until a relationship of trust has been established, there would be some reluctance. We also asked about cybercrime, and they all thought that they were far too sophisticated to ever fall prey to a cyber attack. So good luck to them. Hope that that's true. We asked about top-ups, and they thought that would be really helpful for their friends and family, not necessarily for them, because they're not looking to round up a coffee purchase to invest in their ISA. They're a bit beyond that, but they could see how that'd be really applicable to some of their friends and their family members. And we asked if they'd be interested in investing in financial products offered by Google or Apple or other tech giants, and there wasn't a huge amount of interest in that. And in fact, most of them don't use Google Pay or Apple Pay, which I found really, really interesting. Right, so that brings us to the end of our consumer focus group session.